Welcome to Your Impact Story. Our goal is to inspire you to have a positive impact on the world around you. And now, here is author, speaker, coach, and our host, Dustin Rogers.
Hey friends, welcome back to Your Impact Story podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Rogers. I get excited for every podcast. I'm a little starstruck today. I am sitting in the cages at Firm Foundation with Danny Sheaffer. I've known Danny my whole life. If you grew up in and around Mount Airy, you knew Danny as a pro baseball player. When I was a kid, he came and spoke for the first time I met Danny as a Cub Scout. He came and talked to our Cub Scout pack when I was just a kid. Grew up watching him. I've got his autographed baseball cards from several teams he played for. But I'm going to let Danny tell his story today. I'm excited about the podcast. Welcome to the show, Danny Sheaffer.
Thanks, Dustin. Awesome to be here. You know, it's a long journey, and I started out in Pennsylvania. I'm not from here. I've been here 37 years. Thankfully, my wife determined where we were going to live, and I started out late in life when it comes to baseball because I had no desire to play baseball as a team member. I didn't have any equipment. I didn't have a glove. I didn't have a bat. We hit with sticks we had on the farm at home, and wasn't an actual farm. We just raised some cows and some pigs, and that's about it. But I was playing kickball one day, and we were at elementary school, and I was 11 years old, and there was a kid in school, a popular kid, and his name was Shane, and he was teasing me one day because I wouldn't go out for his little league baseball team, and kickball is what we were playing, but I was always good at throwing a ball. And so I had a choice. I was either going to fight the kid because he was kind of a bully, or I was going to go home and ask my dad if I could play baseball. So I went home, and my dad was changing oil in his truck, and I said, "Dad, I want to play baseball." He said, "Well, go in the back of the house and play with your brothers." And I said, "No, I want to play on a team." He goes, "What's that going to cost?" I said, "I have no idea, but they're having signups at the fire station tonight." So he said, "What time?" And I told him. We got in the truck and we went down, and he signed me up. They asked my dad for $5. Times have changed.
Right.
And my dad paid $5, and they told him what team I was going to be on, and went to my first practice that night. He dropped me off. He didn't stay. He had to go to his second job. And I walked up to the coach and I introduced myself, and he said, "Where's your glove?" And I said, "I don't have one." He said, "Where's your bat?" And I said, "I don't have one." He goes, "What position do you play, son?" And I said, "I don't know." He said, "Well, go to left field." And I looked at him kind of lost, and I said, "Where's that?" And that's the truth. And he told me and pointed out to the outfield. And in Pennsylvania, our outfield fences were snow fences, little slat fences about 6 feet high. And so I was standing out there in left field, and the grass was about 6 or 8 inches tall, and no balls were coming out at all. And I was bored. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then the third baseman was fielding a ground ball, and he got a bad hop, and the ball came up and hit him in the chin. And when the ball hit him in the chin, he threw his glove down and started crying. And the coach looked around and looked at me. He said, "Hey, you, the new kid, do you want to play third base?" And I said, "Yes, if I can use his glove." So I used his glove, and this game became easy at third base. And I was having a blast for about 10 minutes, and then the catcher got hit with a foul tip where no one wants to get hit. And the catcher was throwing up at home plate. He was crying, and the coach looked at me and said, "Hey, you, the new kid, do you want to catch?" And I said, "Nope, not now." He goes, "Well, if you want to play on this team, you'll catch." They took the gear, they put it on me. That was 4 months before my 12th birthday. 1 year later, we win the state championship in Pennsylvania.
Wow.
We went to the Eastern Regionals and came one game short of going to Williamsport for the Little League World Series.
Wow.
That fast forward into middle school, and it was junior high school back then, and high school baseball, which went really well. Played really well. We had a good team. We had 3 pros off the team, including myself, and I was 1 year from reaching what I thought was my dream, which would be drafted into Major League Baseball.
Sure.
And at the start of my senior season at Redland High School in Pennsylvania, I was getting letters from a lot of major league clubs to work out, pre-draft workouts and stuff like that. And along with those letters were some letters from colleges like Penn State and Maryland, USC, and some other smaller schools. And I just threw those in the trash because I didn't want to go to college. The last thing I want to do was go to school.
Right.
And so right before our senior season, um, there was a nuclear plant that had a partial meltdown in Pennsylvania called 3 Mile Island. And it was right beside my high school, which canceled most of my senior season.
Wow.
The draft letters stopped. The phone calls stopped. We evacuated for 6 weeks. And when we came back to school, we had about a 2-week window to play baseball. And my coach asked me, he goes, "Hey, where are you going to go to college?" And I said, I'm not going to need to go to college. I'm going to be drafted. And he said, "After this season, you better change your mind because there's no interest anymore because of the island that almost melted down," which was devastating to me because I wanted to play professional baseball. And so he said, "Why don't you go to Clemson University?" And I said, "Well, where's that? I had never heard of it." And he goes, "Well, it's a school in South Carolina. It's a good baseball program." So we sat down in his office and we wrote a letter to Coach Bill Wilhelm at Clemson University and put it in the mail that day. And no emails, no cell phones, no computers.
Right.
And I included my statistics from the prior years and the rest of the season when we would be home and away, and just put it in the mail. And about a week later, there was a gentleman from South Carolina that showed up at a baseball game. And I don't even know what I did that day. I have no idea. I might have got 2 hits. I might have got no hits. I have no idea. But after the game, he approached my coach and he said, "Is there a place that I can talk to Danny Sheaffer?" And the coach said, "Yeah, you can go to my office." And my mom and dad were at the game, and we went to the coach's office, and he goes, "Look," he was a man of a few words, and he was right to business. Um, his name was Bill Wilhelm, and his brother Hoyt's in the Hall of Fame, knuckleball pitcher. But Bill was a legendary college coach, and I didn't know it at the time. Um, he was just an old grumpy guy to me, and so when we sat down at the desk in my coach's office, Bill Wilhelm said, "Look, I don't have a lot of time, son." He said, "But we've got a spot for you at Clemson University. If you want to come, your mom and dad won't have to pay a dime." And before I could say yes or no, my dad slapped the desk and said, "That's where we're going." That's how I ended up at Clemson University, and the story continues from there.
So I wanna pause for just a second. And you were, so from almost 12 years old, baseball started.
Mm-hmm.
Baseball became life, right? Thanks to your dad saying, "Okay, get in the truck. We'll go do it. We'll sign up." And then you learn quick in the first practice, "Okay, hey, I don't like it out here. I don't like this." But you said yes to the opportunity to move infield.
Right.
And then maybe by necessity, move behind the plate so you
Mm-hmm.
can keep playing ball. But then baseball becomes life from 12 to what, 17, 18?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But then for a while, it looked like that dream was maybe coming to a complete stop,
Yeah.
right? Things outside of your control. But then your coach, you being honest with your coach and, "Hey, this is where I want to go. I want to be drafted." And then the coach saying, "Hey, this is what you need. And here's a path, right? Let's reach out to Clemson." Uh, the impact that had on your life and your career is outstanding, right? And it's something we don't really think about in the moment, right? We're just going, "Okay, coach, you want to do this?" Sure. But had it not been for that letter to Clemson, the story could have been different, right?
The story would have been way different.
Right. So you're going to Clemson. Dad slaps the desk. He signs you up that day.
Mm-hmm.
Let's carry the story from there.
Well, I didn't get drafted. A friend of mine that we were competing with for the prior 4 years in high school, his name was Al Chambers. Never played in the big leagues, but he ended up being the first pick in the country in 1979.
Okay.
So I sat at home kind of devastated knowing that selfishly, I thought I was a better player.
Right.
But I didn't get a phone call. So battled through that summer, went to Clemson University. Um, I didn't come from a lot of money. My parents worked very, very hard. They made sure we had what we needed, not in excess. And when I got to Clemson, um, first time I was ever away from home, basically, other than a couple of baseball trips. And mom and dad dropped me off at Clemson. They spent the night. We went to a Kmart and they bought me a bicycle because freshmen weren't allowed to have cars at Clemson. They bought me a bicycle, and my dad handed me $200 and told me to put it in the bank in a savings account. Mom gave me a hug and said, "We'll see you at Christmas." And that was in mid-August.
That was it.
$200
Right.
and a bicycle.
Right.
Well, me being the not wise money manager at the time, and I was out of money in about 3 weeks.
Right.
And after the first week, somebody stole my bicycle.
Mm.
And so, as we might talk about later, I write about this in my book, and I found out a necessity that I needed to have friends and that had cars and money. So that's what I searched for in my friend group at Clemson. And you know, I was a freshman on the baseball team. There was 2 other freshman catchers. Um, Things were going very, very well. I think I started the first 33 or 34 baseball games of the year. Um, was doing okay. I wasn't tearing it up or anything, but I was holding my own as a freshman, and we had a lot of seniors and juniors on the team, and we had a very, very good team. Um, I was very immature at the time. I did things my way. I was hard headed. I didn't take advice very well. I didn't take criticism at all. Um, because the game was easy for me. Um, that led to a personality conflict with my coach and myself. And looking back, I mean, he's passed away now, but looking back, I'd kind of like to try to make amends with that, but it's too late now. And you know, he had the hammer. He wrote the lineup, and I didn't play for a month and a half. And I sat there and watched the team. And our team won the Atlantic Coast Conference. We won our regional. We went to Omaha for the World Series. I walked into Rosenblatt Stadium, not expecting to play. Looked at the lineup, and my name's in the lineup. And I didn't play for a month and a half. Um, we we lost to Miami that night. Um, I got it. I know I scored a run. I got a hit, and the next night when I was next day when we were playing Cal State Fullerton, and we had to win or go home. It was double elimination. I couldn't get out of bed. I was sick. There's no way. I had later classified as mono, and there's no way that the trainer was going to let me go in the ballpark and infect anybody else. So I sat and listened to our game, and we lost to Cal State Fullerton. And I had a knock on my door that night about 2 in the morning. And I go into detail on this in my book, but Bill Wilhelm was beating on my door at 2 in the morning. And, you know, Bill's personality was, you know, he was a very, very good coach. He's a very hard man. Um, Probably visited the Scotch table too many times. And he beat on my door and looked me in the eye and said, "If you want to come back to Clemson, you have to make my team to get your scholarship." And I said, "Bill, that's not the deal you told my mom and dad." He goes, "Well, I changed my mind, kid." Wow. So I shut the door, got on an airplane, drove back or flew back to Pennsylvania, and told my dad, had enough guts to finally tell my dad I wasn't going back to Clemson. And my dad looked at me and said, "Well, I can't pay for college. What are you going to do now?" And my mindset is, "I'll figure it out." Um, I called Oklahoma State. They were interested in me the year before. I talked to the coach at Oklahoma State, and he said, "Love to have you come here." He goes, "But you got to sit out a year. You can't play, and we can't give you a scholarship, not for a year." And that's before the transfer portal and all of this crazy stuff that's going on, the NIL money now in sports. And so I told Gary Ward, I said, "Gary, I'll make you a deal." I said, if I go to a junior college and wait a year, will I be eligible to come to Oklahoma State? He said, absolutely. I said, okay, if I'm not drafted in the first 5 rounds, then I'll come to Oklahoma State. Well, that was a pipe dream because I really hadn't played baseball. I went to a junior college in Pennsylvania that didn't have a baseball program. How stupid was that? It's the only thing I could afford.
Right.
My birthday was August 2nd. The cutoff day for American Legion Baseball was August 1st. I was still eligible to play American Legion Baseball after my first year of college. Wow. That turned out to be one of the biggest advantages and miracles of my life because I ended up playing on an East-West All-Star game in Pennsylvania, and American Legion Baseball in Pennsylvania was like the cream of the crop. And when I looked out at our All-Star team, I look out at 3 major leaguers, including myself, Sid Breen being one, Ruben Amaro Jr. being another, and there was a scout at a game at the East-West All-Star game. His name's Charlie Wagner, nicknamed Broadway Charlie because he was always dressed up in a suit. He was Ted Williams' old roommate with the Red Sox. Okay. I had a pretty good game, and season was over. Kind of looking forward to the next draft before I made my commitment to go to Oklahoma State. And I get a phone call from my high school coach. And he said, hey, Danny, you were just drafted in the first round by the Baltimore Orioles. I said, what? I didn't even talk to Baltimore. Well, I didn't get a phone call. No confirmation of that. And the next morning, because we didn't have ESPN, we didn't have the draft like you can watch now.
Right.
There was a knock on my mom and dad's door, and it was a courier from Western Union, and he was carrying a telegram from the Boston Red Sox. So I found out that I was drafted by the Boston Red Sox. I was picked the 20th player in the country in the first round in 1981, and that started a pro career.
That's awesome. When you just said Baltimore just now, I thought, wait a minute, that's not the way that I remember the story. That's an awesome. Today we watch it on TV,
Sure.
right? And you think that it's all live and
Hmm.
you're in the big crowd and the whole thing. But that's amazing. And so I think there was probably a time too, the end of Clemson, where you thought baseball may be over, right? Another transition time.
Yeah.
But you kept your eye on the goal. You kept working, and
My goal, Dustin, was never to prove anybody wrong, because I found out early in life if and people can try to do that if they want to, and that's fine. But I found out that if my goal was to prove the doubters wrong, it would never ever finish. I'd never reach that goal because sooner or later someone's going to tell you you can't.
right.
And if sometimes it's from the people that love you the most. And so the day after the draft, and I still have this article saved because my mom was a mess on saving scrap paper and articles from newspapers and stuff. And there was a Clemson newspaper, and I forget the name of the newspaper, but it was in the Clemson vicinity, and Bill Wilhelm was interviewed the day after the draft. And there's a quote in there that says, the Boston Red Sox made the biggest mistake of the 1981 draft.
Wow.
That hurt at the time,
Sure.
but it wasn't motivation to prove him wrong, because there's thousands of people out there like Bill Wilhelm
Right.
on your way up that would like to laugh at you on the way down. So I took that as motivation to prove myself right, not to prove anybody wrong. Because I knew that once I stepped on the baseball field, I know I'm not going to be in Cooperstown unless I want to go tour it. I know that. I played professionally 18 years. I played with many Hall of Famers. I'm realistic about my ability. But when I took the field, starting as a young player, whether it was Little League or a Legion ball or high school ball or Clemson college baseball. Um, I may not have been the best one on the field, okay, but I definitely wasn't the worst. And I knew that I was not intimidated by anybody that was out there. And so I knew I could play with them. And so when I got drafted, I took that as saying, okay, well, that's just their opinion. If they think that I made the biggest mistake, um, I'm just going to do what I do. And, I had very little spiritual upbringing. I had very little faith at that time. Believed in God, went to church Christmas and Easter, and that's about it. And then I was all on my own. And so I signed my first contract. Broadway Charlie Wagner came to my house, made me an offer. Um, I didn't take it. I knew a little bit about the game. Um, I asked for more money. It wasn't a lot. I asked for more money, and um, he made a phone call and okayed it. And I knew by the look in his eyes that I better not ask for any more. So I signed my contract, and I was off. And I started my first season in Elmira, New York, in rookie ball. Um, Played for a manager there who I still speak to today. His name's Dick Berardino. Um, and I walked in that clubhouse, and the first thing I saw, there was 3 catchers on the roster, and all 3 were first-round picks. I'm like, how is this going to work out?
Right.
Well, we had a short season. We played 72 games.
Okay.
And the short season, as far as the rookie ball, started in June and went through early August or early September. And I ended up playing 64 ball games,
Wow.
having a great season. And that started my journey through the minor leagues. It was a process, but plenty of opportunity to say, no, I'm going to do something different. I was broke. I didn't have any money. First paycheck was $236 after taxes. And we were living, me and 2 other guys were living with a 70-year-old lady in her attic. She gave us her attic for $25 a week.
Wow. So, real quick, talk about we're sitting in the cages and you have so many students come to you today, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but just the numbers. Anybody that plays baseball and enjoys the game wants to be a major leaguer.
Yeah.
Right? But what's that look like? The draft has several rounds. How many people get to that level? How many are actually drafted every year? Talk us through those stats just a little.
Well, a lot less now than used to be. For example, Hall of Famer Mike Piazza was drafted in the 62nd round.
Wow.
That was cut down to 40 rounds for a long time. As a matter of fact, my son David was drafted in the 38th round. Now it's down to 20. And the COVID year, it was down to 5. But so you got 20 rounds. Now there's free agent signings after that.
Sure.
But if you want to look at the sheer numbers, and this is what's and I'm a realist with this stuff, and I see hundreds and hundreds of kids, and I'll never tell a kid that he can't do something. I might steer him in a different direction, but I'm never going to say you can't.
Right.
And time will take care of those words. But when you look at all the kids in the United States, and I'm kind of a numbers geek, and I might be off with this a little bit, but I'm pretty close. When you look at all the millions of kids that play Little League Baseball, travel ball, rec ball, all of this stuff, 54% of those kids actually play high school baseball. And out of the 54% that play high school baseball, 6.5% will ever play at a college level, and that's junior college, NAIA Division 1, 2, or 3. So we're looking at 6.5% that ever reach college baseball. And out of those 6.5 that reach college baseball, less than 1% ever see a professional field.
Wow.
And so you might want to play the lottery, or you might just want to work your tail off and be one of those 6.5%.
Right. Absolutely.
It's tough.
You're not going to go to practice every day and practice for an hour, or once a week in Little League, you practice and it takes a whole lot more work. It takes a lot of time day after day,
It does.
hours and
Yeah,
hours to get to that, to develop your skill
it does.
to that point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you're also battling with international talent.
Sure.
Today we have 30% of rosters in the minor leagues made up of international talent.
Okay.
And so there's no draft over there in the Dominican, whether it's, there is in Puerto Rico, but when you're looking at Latin America, Central America, even worldwide, Japan, Korea, and some other places, these are all free agent signings. So your likelihood of actually putting on a professional uniform is really, really slim.
All right. So you're in the minor
Mm-hmm.
leagues. You're living with three guys in an attic.
Mm-hmm.
Take us from there. What's next in the journey?
Well, obviously, you want to move up. You never want to go backwards. And so I had a pretty good year in Elmira. Went to an instructional league that year in Florida with the Red Sox and in the fall, which is about a 6 to 8 week training for the rookies. Um, the next year, I went to Winter Haven, Florida, which is high A ball, which is jumped over Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which is low A ball. So I was feeling pretty good about myself and got to the season and played for a first-year manager, Tom Kochman, and looking back, I can relate to a lot of the things he went through as a first-year manager because I experienced that 20 years later. Um, but on an off day, which kind of really put my whole life on a trajectory different than what I had hoped, which ended up turning out being great. I was playing basketball with my roommates. We were just messing around at a court, um, at a city court outside in Winter Haven, Florida, and why we were playing basketball in the middle of the summer, I have no idea, but I went up for a shot and came down and stepped on the ankle of one of my roommates, and I broke my ankle. Um, not proud of how it happened and what happened next, but again, it's a paragraph in my book that I write that I went to the ballpark that day. I knew it was broke. Jumped in the batting cage, acted like I was hitting, which I was. Fell down, used that as an excuse of why I hurt my ankle, and the club bought it for a while. I ended up being in a cast, but in this world, there's no secrets, and roommates will rat you out, and I ended up paying the price for that. But we do stupid things sometimes, and sometimes we got to pay the consequences. And so I came back to spring training the next year, expecting fully to either go back to the Florida State League because I had a pretty good year in Florida, and um, only played about 70 games out of the 140 because I was hurt. Um, and the Red Sox sent me back to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which was low A ball. And I was kind of devastated with that because you don't want to go backwards in this game. It's like repeating fifth grade. Well, when I got to Winston-Salem, played for a very, very good quality coach. His name was Bill Slack, old school guy. Um, Probably had one of the best years of my minor league career. Um, Made an all-star team and um, actually ended up meeting my future bride. Uh, and we met in 1983. Her name's LaDonna, and we ended up getting married 5 years later. So pretty good injury result there going back to,
Worked out.
yeah, it worked out pretty good.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about your family, and then let's jump back into baseball. Uh, so you and LaDonna
Uh-huh.
have three kids. Talk to me a little bit about the family.
Well, we were married in 1988, and I'll tell you the story of how we got engaged in a few minutes. It's kind of freaky, but we uh, we had Daniel, our first. He was 6 weeks early. Really, really close to losing both of them. I was playing for the Pirates at the time. I was done with the Red Sox, and I had moved on, and I went to the Cleveland Indians after that and played in Cleveland organization in the big leagues for a year, and then was a free agent and signed with the Pirates. Well, LaDonna was pregnant, and Daniel was born in Buffalo, New York. Had an emergency C-section, placenta abruption, and it was really, really devastating. We almost lost both of them. And so Daniel was born. And we brought him home at 4 pounds, 12 ounces. And uh, then moved on, and Daniel was our only boy, and then David came along. David was born in 1995 while I was playing with the St. Louis Cardinals. My wife won't let me live that down to this day because I was playing in St. Louis and my beeper or pager went off when we used to have pagers. And her brother, Brent, told me that she's in labor. It's time. Wasn't supposed to be time. She was 4 weeks early, and I jumped on a plane, flew back to North Carolina. Joe Torre was my manager in St. Louis, and he said, "Sure, get out of here, get out of here." Well, um, when I got back, um, the I missed the berth by about a half an hour. I spent less than 24 hours at home because my phone rang again and said that an injury happened on the field that night, and I had a choice either to stay in North Carolina or were going to call somebody up from the minor leagues so they could catch. And I knew just by the nature of the game that if you give somebody else an opportunity, it might be your last.
Right.
I jumped back on a plane, was home less than 24 hours, and was playing that next night against the San Francisco Giants. So David was born in 1995, and then several years later, after I finally retired in 1999, I went on to manage, and in 2002, my daughter Loriana was born. So I have two boys and a girl. Both boys played at Masters University in California. David was drafted out of high school by Tampa Bay and signed. He went and played his final year in college at UNC Wilmington and signed with the Seattle Mariners and played for 6 years with them. And so all our kids are married. Got one granddaughter, got two on the way. And so life is good. But going back to that, and I'll make a quick story about that, back in 1987, when I made the Major League Club for the first time in Boston, the NCAA March Madness 64 team pool was out there, and it was $50 a team with the Red Sox to pull a name out of a hat. You didn't know who you're pulling out. You just picked a team. Well, I wanted to be part of that stuff because I've never been a part of that, and I wanted to be part of the team, So we got these guys making millions of dollars a year, dropping $50, and I'm like, I can do that. So I took some of my meal money, which I didn't have a lot of at the time, and I had a $100 bill, and I was too embarrassed to ask for change. So the guy said, "You want two teams?" I said, "Sure." And I think, what a nut! I can't afford this. Well, I watched the brackets, and I picked the 16th team and the 32nd team. 16 was Syracuse, 32 was Indiana. And I'm looking at the board and I'm thinking, I'm either going to be out really quick or I got a chance. It came down to the Sweet 16. They're both in it, and they're both on different brackets. Came down to the Elite Eight, and it came down to the Final Four. I was two of four teams that I had. And I'm thinking I'm either going to be out of it or I'm going to make money.
Right.
One day later, I didn't even watch the final game because Syracuse played Indiana, and I won $3,200 cash.
That's awesome.
And I went and bought my wife an engagement ring with that money.
That is an awesome story. That is awesome. I've never heard that story before. That is great. Things just work out.
And I made the team.
That's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool. So, talk us through. You played for several clubs.
I did. Yeah.
I think when I first knew you, you were at the Rockies,
Mm-hmm.
and so played for the Rockies, and then you finished your career, your major career at St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Talk us through that. Talk us through retiring as a player, and there's so much. We have episode after episode of just the career, but transitioning from majors. A lot of people retire, and they the journey continues in a different direction, away from baseball or away from professional sports, whatever it is. Talk us through that next phase, if you will.
Well, I went from Boston to Cleveland, and Cleveland to Pittsburgh, and then went on to Minnesota for 2 years. And then the Rockies came on board in the fall of 1992, and they were an expansion team. And and I was back and forth from the major leagues, minor leagues, and I had a choice in the winter of 1992. I was a free agent, and there were several clubs that were offering pretty good contracts to have a AAA side of it and then a major league side of it. And the White Sox were one of them. And they had offered me quite a bit of money in AAA, which at that time was, maybe about $9,000 a month, which was really good in AAA. And then the Rockies called. And this is before the expansion draft, and it was before they named a manager, and they said, we're going to give you an opportunity, but we can't pay you a lot of money. So they had $5,000 on the AAA side, and then major league minimum. And at that time, it might have been 150,000. I'm not sure. But so we signed. I took opportunity over money. I was about 30 years old at the time, and I said, well, this might be our last chance to roll the dice. And so I went to spring training with the Rockies, and they named Don Baylor the manager. Don Baylor was a teammate of mine in 1987 in Boston. There's 4 other catchers on the roster: Joe Girardi, myself, a couple of younger guys, Brad Ausmus, and some other guys that weren't ready yet. Eric Wedge was supposed to be the second catcher on the team. He ended up getting surgery in the winter. Didn't tell the Rockies. Came to spring training and wasn't ready. I ended up making that team. Spent the next 6 years in the big leagues with the 2 with the Rockies, and went on to the St. Louis Cardinals and spent 4 years with the St. Louis Cardinals. Finished at 37 or 38 years old and retired. And when I retired, I was with the Chicago Cubs. I went to 1 year with Chicago, and they said, well, you want to manage? And I said, no, I don't want to manage. I said, all the managing jobs are filled right now, because it was the end of spring training, because I retired. My wife wasn't feeling well, and I just had to get home. And so I just retired on my own, and came home, and they called back and said, you want to manage again? And I said, well, where? And they said, well, Eugene, Oregon. Like, Oregon? I said, I can't go there now. And they said, no, come out in June after the draft. It was a short season team. So I went right into managing, managed for Chicago for a year or so, and then went back to St. Louis and managed every level with the Cardinals, A-ball, AA, AAA, for 4 years, and was a catching coordinator for them. And like any organization, leadership changes, and they bring in a new, and the old's got to go. And so I went from there to Houston. Spent 6 years as the catching coordinator in Houston. Leadership came in again. I didn't want to go back to coaching on the field. I wanted to go back. I wanted to stay as a coordinator where I could teach my craft. And so then I left there in 2012 and went to the Tampa Bay Rays and managed in Tampa Bay, actually in Princeton, West Virginia, because it was an hour from home, and managed there until 2020. And then this beautiful virus came in, and I decided to shut it down and go my own way. And that's where this facility came in. And my company, Firm Foundation Baseball, and um, you know, Firm is twofold. Obviously, you have to have a firm foundation to play this, but you also have to have a spiritual foundation to play this game. And so that's where Firm came from. And Firm is an acronym, and F stands for faith in Christ alone, integrity for the I, live a life of integrity. That's what I want to do. R in Firm is redeemed by the blood of Christ, and M is for maturity. And for me, I want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant, with what I've gave you. And so that's what I kind of convey to the kids and to the parents. And I really don't know how somebody can spend 40 years in professional baseball like I did and walk away and do something else. Maybe I could have, I don't know, but it's too much of in the fabric of who I am. And some days are great. Some days you want to throw a ball against the wall. But in the end, I think we've got a responsibility to the next generation. And I've had people that impacted me, like Tony La Russa and Joe Torre and Jim Leland on the field. I've had some wonderful, wonderful mentors that helped me spiritually. And so, that's kind of what I want to do.
Absolutely. And Danny, I'll say one, you and I got to know each other through church,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always appreciated and respected your firm foundation in your faith, and you're willing to not just say it, right, but but deliver it. And I know that you're a man that gets up every day to glorify God in your work. And I love seeing where people's passions come together with their purpose. And I think that you exemplify that. I've always appreciated that about you. So, uh, a legacy, an incredible journey, an incredible career in baseball, and that's taken you to not only to the firm foundation and coaching other kids, but there's a new chapter unfolding right now, right? You've wrote a book about your life in baseball. Tell us about Keep Digging.
Well, keep digging is basically the mantra that I've always lived by. I didn't quit. Um, may take a different direction, but I don't quit. Um, we're not always in control of our circumstances, but we are in control how we react to our circumstances for sure. And so I started writing a book in 2020 when right before I retired. And I started writing it by mistake because I was a little bored with the way spring training meetings were going and the new analytical stuff coming in and all of that and kind of like an old school guy, I just didn't want to hear some of that stuff. And the game's coming back full circle, by the way, but it's slow coming back. But anyway, I was a little bored, and so I started writing, and I started writing about my journey. And I started out with talking about Shane and teasing me on the playground and some of the stories that I told you, and it was all handwritten. And next thing I know, I'm about 450 pages in, and it's all handwritten. And my kids were like, "What are you gonna do with that, Dad?" And I said, "Well, I'm just writing a book." And they said, "Well, you got to put it on a Word document. You got to do." And so they kind of helped me out with it, and so uh, I put the book down for about 3 years and just let it sit in my closet, and then picked it back up again about 2 years ago. And um, you know, I wanted the book to be an encouragement to anybody going through any trials and tribulations. I want to be an encouragement to keep going, not to quit. For parents, how to navigate this crazy world of baseball, sports in general, and how it can consume your family, um, and how you can sacrifice your child on that altar and end up paying more money than you would actually to pay the college. Um, I wrote it as a field guide for players to how to navigate the ups and downs of the game. Um, And in the end, the total book for me just exemplifies the sovereignty of God in our life, even though we don't even know it. The stories that I told you about Clemson University and the Little League Baseball and minor league baseball, and that was all before God had control of my life. I thought I was in control. And so, but looking back, you can see how the pieces are all put together and who was put in your life and who was instrumental in leading you to the understanding of the gospel and um, and so at the end of the book, it's a challenge to people to ask them where they're at in their walk, um, and also step by step guide on how to not only navigate this crazy game, but raising a family. Just obviously the death of parents and friends and all of that stuff, and just understand that there's a greater purpose than just the years we walk here on this earth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for that. So if somebody wants to pick up a copy of the book,
It's a great time to get it right before Father's Day or close to Father's Day, but you can go to Amazon.com. If they just type in "Keep Digging"
okay.
and my name, Danny Sheaffer, there's two books that are going to come up. I got to warn you, don't buy the black book because it's an AI generated, oh, wow, kind of a fraud. My book, Keep Digging, is red. It's got pictures of me on the front. It's got pictures of me preaching the gospel and the Dominican on the back, and but you get it there. Um, eventually we'll be into some more bookstores, but um, if anybody's interested in asking questions on the book or speaking engagements or any opportunities like that, there's an email on the back of the book. It's called keepdiggingbook@gmail.com.
Okay.
That's a way to get a hold of me. Uh, and I'll be happy to share my story with those that ask.
Perfect. Before we wrap up, Danny, talk to me a little bit about your mission work. Not only have you had an amazing career, but you have, I said it a minute ago, but you know that you have a purpose in life beyond the field. Talk to us a little bit about your mission work, what you've done, and what you're doing today.
Well, I started out, one of my fears in life growing up was speaking in front of a crowd. I mean, if the teacher would ask me to read in public, I'd lock up. I couldn't pronounce simple words. And my greatest fear turned into my greatest passion. Um, and that's only with the Lord's help for sure. But um, I've got an opportunity to share the gospel, in front of thousands and thousands of people worldwide. But um, I'm tied right now to a mission group, to a ministry called Score International, and we go around the world, many Latin American countries. I've been to Russia, Ireland, Thailand, many South American countries, and we use in general. Some of the trips are different, but I use the platform of baseball to share the gospel. Sure. And so, we give baseball clinics worldwide, and then give the kids an opportunity to understand why we're there, and we're tied in with missionaries in every country. So there's follow up, and we end up building churches in the Amazon region, in Brazil, and many in the Dominican, Panama, and Costa Rica. But I was able to take 34 people um, from my facility here at Firm Foundation on a mission trip a little over a year ago to the Dominican. Many first time out of the country, many first time on an airplane, and they were champions. They were great. So we had 13 or 14 middle school baseball players and their parents, and we went to the Dominican, and we gave clinics, and we played baseball against the locals down there, and we visited, girls' orphanage, boys' orphanage that we're tied to, and we fed villages, um, and ultimately, the kids that went, um, got to hear repetitive accounts of the gospel. So I think it made an impact on those that went, as well as those that we served down there. And that's the goal. We want to continue to do this through my foundation called the Sheaffer Foundation, and it's a tax deductible nonprofit that has three of my passions that we give to, and it's not a multi-million-dollar foundation yet. May never be, but the three areas that are my passion that I give to, and we support career missionaries that are in the field. Um, we give to pro-life groups to protect the unborn. Uh, that's a passion of my wife's and mine. And we also raise money and help facilitate short-term mission trips for um, uh, kids from the age of 11 and 12 up to 17 or 18. And so we're planning more trips, and the proceeds from my book, Keep Digging, go to the Sheaffer Foundation.
Okay.
To help alleviate some of those costs.
That's outstanding. Thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
Thank you for your time today. I know you got students coming in soon. Again, I appreciate you. You've been a spiritual mentor and a friend to me for a long time. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Dusty.
And excited. Go to Amazon, get your copy of Keep Digging, and Danny's contact info. We'll also put links to your social on the podcast as well. So
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. This is Your Impact Story. We'll see you next time.
Is that all right?
I thought that was awesome, man. I loved it.
Yeah, good job, buddy.
Yeah.
You did really well.
Yeah. This was great.